the laughter that shattered a marriage. James had always trusted Lisa implicitly. After 10 years of marriage, he considered their relationship unshakable, a fortress built on a foundation of love and mutual respect. James worked as a graphic designer from their cozy suburban home, while Lisa held a demanding job as a regional sales manager for a large corporation. Her role required frequent travel, but James never questioned it. He believed in her and their marriage. But as he would soon discover, even the strongest trusts can crumble in an instant. Lisa's latest trip had been to Chicago for a week-long sales conference. As always, she left with a kiss and a promise to call every evening. True to her word, she called each night, sharing stories about the conference, the people she met, and the city's sights. James listened attentively, happy that she was enjoying herself. However, something was different this time. Her stories felt rehearsed, her laughter forced. James chalked it up to stress from her demanding schedule. She's just tired, he told himself. But a small, nagging feeling in the back of his mind wouldn't let him fully relax. When Lisa's flight landed on Friday evening, James was there to greet her at the airport. She emerged from the terminal laughing, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't notice James immediately, and he couldn't help but notice how carefree she looked. It wasn't the tired, relieved to be home Lisa he usually welcomed back. When she finally spotted him, she ended her call abruptly and rushed over, hugging him tightly. "I missed you," she exclaimed, her laughter still lingering. James smiled, though uneasily. "Missed you too," he replied, loading her suitcase into the car. Over the next few days, James couldn't shake the unease he felt. Lisa seemed distant, yet overly cheerful. She laughed more than usual, often at nothing in particular. When James asked about her trip, her answers were vague or overly detailed, as if she was trying too hard to sound convincing. The breaking point came when James accidentally found her suitcase, still partially packed, in the guest room. While putting away some laundry, he noticed a crumpled receipt sticking out of the side pocket. It was from a high-end restaurant in Chicago, a place Lisa hadn't mentioned visiting. The receipt listed 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, and a dessert. James's heart sank. He wanted to believe there was a logical explanation, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That evening, James decided to confront Lisa. "Hey, I found this in your suitcase," he said, handing her the receipt. "Who did you have dinner with?" Lisa's face went pale. She stammered, her cheerful demeanor evaporating. "Oh, that's nothing. Just a colleague. We were discussing work. Why didn't you mention it?" James pressed, his voice calm but firm. "It didn't seem important," she replied, avoiding his gaze. James didn't push further that night, but the doubt continued to grow. He began paying closer attention, noticing small inconsistencies in her stories and her behavior. A week later, James made a decision that would change everything. While Lisa was in the shower, he checked her phone. What he found confirmed his worst fears. A series of text messages between Lisa and a man named Eric, detailing intimate moments they had shared during the trip. The messages were explicit and left no room for misinterpretation. When Lisa came out of the bathroom, James was sitting on the bed, her phone in his hand. "Who's Eric?" he asked, his voice trembling. Lisa froze, her face a mask of panic. "James, I can explain," she began, but the words caught in her throat. "Explain what?" James demanded, his voice rising. "That you've been lying to me? That you've been cheating?" Tears filled Lisa's eyes as she confessed everything. She admitted to meeting Eric at a previous conference, and that their affair had started months ago. The trip to Chicago had been their opportunity to spend uninterrupted time together. James was devastated. The betrayal cut deeper than he ever imagined possible. He left the house that night, seeking refuge with a close friend. Over the following weeks, he grappled with a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. Lisa, racked with guilt, begged for forgiveness. She promised to end the affair and do whatever it took to repair their marriage. But for James, the damage was irreparable. The laughter she had come home with now echoed in his mind as a symbol of her betrayal. Eventually, they decided to separate. James filed for divorce, unable to see a path forward. Lisa moved out, leaving behind the life they had built together. Years later, James would look back on that time as the most painful chapter of his life. But he also saw it as a turning point, a moment that forced him to reevaluate what he wanted and deserved in a relationship. He learned the value of trust and the importance of listening to his instincts. As for Lisa, she carried the weight of her choices, vowing never to let her desires cloud her judgment again. Their story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how fleeting moments can have lasting consequences, and how laughter can sometimes hide the deepest wounds.
Cheating wife and family scams, a perfect revenge at the gala. Jackson Reed was a man who believed in loyalty, honesty, and love, values he had held close ever since he'd met his wife, Vanessa. Their marriage seemed like a dream from the outside, and to Jackson, it was the cornerstone of his life. But beneath the polished surface, cracks were forming, cracks that would lead to a revelation so profound it would shake his world to its core. Vanessa came from a well-off family. The Harringtons were known in social circles for their charm and influence, but Jackson always felt something slightly off about them. Their business dealings were vague, their stories inconsistent. He dismissed his doubts, trusting Vanessa's assurances that her family was simply misunderstood. Little did he know that their misunderstood nature would come to define his downfall and his eventual triumph. It all started with a late-night phone call. Jackson, working late on a presentation for his firm, noticed Vanessa's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. The caller ID flashed a name he didn't recognize. Marcus. Curiosity got the better of him. Vanessa had been increasingly distant over the past few months, and Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He answered the call only to hear Marcus's voice. Smooth, confident, and far too familiar. "Hey, babe," Marcus said. "Just wanted to remind you about our trip this weekend." Jackson's heart stopped. Vanessa had told him she was visiting her sister in Chicago. The confrontation that night was explosive. Vanessa denied everything at first, but eventually admitted to the affair. "It's not what you think," she pleaded. But Jackson had heard enough. Devastated, he began questioning everything about their marriage and her family. As Jackson reeled from the betrayal, he started noticing patterns he'd previously ignored. Vanessa's family often involved him in their business ventures, asking for his signature on documents or his presence at meetings under the guise of legitimacy. Digging deeper, Jackson discovered a tangled web of scams, fraudulent investments, shell companies, and forged contracts, all using his name as a front. Vanessa's family had been exploiting him for years. His impeccable reputation and clean financial record had made him the perfect pawn in their schemes. Furious and humiliated, Jackson vowed to take them down. Jackson spent months gathering evidence. He hired private investigators, analyzed financial records, and pieced together the full extent of the Harringtons' criminal activities. His discoveries were staggering. Millions of dollars laundered, dozens of victims swindled, and a network of deceit that reached into high society. But Jackson didn't just want justice. He wanted revenge. And he knew the perfect place to expose them. The Harringtons' annual charity gala, an event attended by the city's elite. The night of the gala was a spectacle of glamour and opulence. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled under crystal chandeliers, sipping champagne and praising the Harringtons for their charitable contributions. Vanessa and her family basked in the admiration, oblivious to the storm about to descend. Jackson arrived late, dressed sharply, and carrying a briefcase. His presence turned heads. Everyone knew about the marital troubles, and whispers followed him as he made his way to the stage. Vanessa's face paled when she saw him, but Jackson simply smiled. Taking the microphone, Jackson began his speech. "Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Harrington family for hosting this wonderful event. Tonight, we celebrate generosity and integrity, values we all hold dear. But sometimes, appearances can be deceiving." The room fell silent as Jackson opened his briefcase and projected documents onto a large screen. Bank statements, emails, and forged contracts appeared, each piece of evidence meticulously laid out. Gasps filled the room as Jackson detailed the Harringtons' crimes, sparing no detail. Vanessa and her family tried to interrupt, but security, hired by Jackson, kept them in check. As the revelations unfolded, law enforcement officers entered the ballroom, ready to make arrests. The guests, once admiring, turned on the Harringtons with outrage and disgust. The fallout was swift and brutal. Vanessa's family faced numerous charges, their assets frozen, and their reputation in shambles. Vanessa herself tried to plead ignorance, but Jackson's evidence proved her complicity. Their divorce was finalized quickly, with Jackson ensuring she walked away with nothing. As for Jackson, he emerged from the ordeal stronger and wiser. He received apologies and admiration from those who had doubted him, and he rebuilt his life with a renewed sense of purpose. The gala became the stuff of legend, a cautionary tale about greed, betrayal, and the power of revenge. Jackson never looked back. He had turned his pain into power, exposing the truth and reclaiming his dignity. And as he stood on the ruins of the Harringtons' empire, he knew he'd won, not just against them, but for himself.